I'm joined today with Mubs, who is a prolific indie maker. He's made hundreds of side projects over the years and is really active in the building in public community as well. And he's working on blue sky projects a lot at the moment. So yeah, thanks for passing by for an interview, Mubs.
I love it. Happy to be here. Excited to talk.
Yeah, no worries. So, can you tell us first of all what, for people that don't know, what's Blue Sky? What's your Blue Sky directory, and like, why are you excited to be on that platform?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess just give context. Like I was a huge Twitter fan. Like I signed up back in 2009. Been an active user on there for pretty much ever since. And I met lots of awesome people. Did lots of building in public on Twitter, and it kind of just led to more work and more projects and making lots of relationships that have lasted outside of that as well. Um, I kind of went a little bit off Twitter at one job, which was they just weren't happy about people posting a lot about what we were working on social media and things like that. So I kind of went a little bit quiet. And then, so I still posted from time to time, but not as active as I was. And then I came back once I left that job, and it wasn't quite the same. Like this was after Elon had kind of taken over Twitter. It was
Mm,
now called X, and all that kind of stuff. And so it wasn't quite the same vibe that it had when I had originally started to kind of be active on there. And so when Blue Sky showed up on the radar, I mean, I tried it out first in 2023, and it showed some promise, but it wasn't quite there yet. Like it didn't have all the features that we needed. It didn't have all the functionality, definitely didn't have all the people that we needed either. Because after all, it's a social network. If the people aren't there, it doesn't matter what the features and functionality are. But back in October this year, I kind of made the choice that, okay, I'm going to stop being active on X. I'm going to try to be active on Blue Sky again and now, and try and use it as my primary social network, and we'll kind of see what happens for a while. And it just so happened that this was pre-election, but the election in the US happened, and we know what happened, but it also triggered off this like mass shift of people like, okay, we don't want to be on X anymore. Where do we land? Do we go to Threads? Do we go to some other social? Do we go to Mastodon or any of those ones? And a lot of people chose Blue Sky. Like I think back in October, I think they had just announced that they reached 13 million accounts on Blue Sky, and I think they've passed 22 million now. So in the last month, what is that, 35-40% increase in the number of users, and it's slowing down a little bit, but it's still, I think they're still active. Yeah, adding over between a half a million and a million accounts a day right now is still. And at 22 million, I think we've got a significant traction, a significant activity level that I think it's going to stick now.
yeah, that's
Uh,
sick. Yeah, sorry. I think it might even be 24, but
oh,
I think like I'm not there's Blue Sky Counter which you can check,
yeah,
but yeah, like I think like a week or like maybe 2 weeks ago, I was having dinner with people and they were asking me about like, oh yeah, I've heard this thing, Blue Sky. And at the time I was like, oh yeah, it's like it's growing now. There's 15 million, and now whatever there's 22 or 24. So that was like about 2 weeks ago.
yeah,
So yeah, like I'm on there myself. It seems like a nice place to post. And like a fresh start. Um, like something that I think's interesting is lots of people like Justin Jackson from Transistor has just written, I think a few days ago, that he's just gonna archive his Twitter and move to
yep,
Blue Sky. And he had 40,000 followers there. So that's a
yep.
pretty huge move to be like, no, I'm done. So I was kind of gonna ask you, like, what are your predictions? Do you think more people will do that, or do you think some people will be like, "Oh, but I've got 40,000 followers. I can't quit."
I think it's going to depend from person to person. I mean, obviously, there's some people who've already like so AOC, I think, for example, who people who don't know AOC, she's a
Yeah.
politician here in the US. She's very popular with the liberal side of things, but she's probably the most active celebrity on Blue Sky right now. I mean, she's got something like 800,000 followers. Obviously, she has a lot more on Twitter, but she has the pull to be able to pull a lot of those people over to Blue Sky as well. So I think we'll see more of that trend. I think most people will keep some kind of presence on X. As kind of like it's still going to be like a platform that you have to be engaged with, especially if you're a member of the public and celebrity wise. Until I mean, Twitter had 300 million 300 million users. How many of them active? We don't really know. But until those numbers come down sufficiently, most people will still maintain some kind of presence on Twitter. I think like in Justin Jackson's case, I think there's a split between him personally, Transistor, and so there's like an organizational element and there's a personal element. And I'm assuming, and I haven't checked, I'm assuming Transistor's still active on X. I'm assuming he's turned off his personal account. And I think Justin's in kind of a unique position too. He started building his email list up long time ago. I would imagine he still engages with most of his audience through his emailing list. And so whether he's on Twitter or Blue Sky doesn't really matter to him, I don't think. Obviously, there's still where do you want to hang out, but in terms of like your reach and your ability to reach people, his email list, I think, is what he values most highly. So it's a little bit easier for him to kind of make that move. I mean, I think it's 16,000 followers on X Twitter as well, and so it was kind of jarring to go from 15, 16 to 0.
Definitely.
But I'm up to 6 on Blue Sky as well. So
6,000 though, not 6.
yes, not 6, 6,000. Yes. So yeah. So I mean, obviously, like I was trying to figure out like. Obviously hard numbers are hard to you can't really compare the two in terms of the platform. I was thinking about it more in terms of like what's the percentage of users who are active on the platform that follow me, and if you think about it that way, 6,000 out of 24 million versus 15, 16,000 out of 300 million. I think my percentage wise I'm like way up there in terms of that. So that's how I'm trying to figure out like am I doing well on kind of Blue Sky right now. I think I'm doing okay,
Yeah.
and I'm hoping to get to the same, if not higher, on Blue Sky than I was on X as well. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think something I've noticed is like if you've got a following, I mean, you've got a bigger following than I do, but if we both have a following on one platform, if you go to another one and say, "Hey, I'm on this one now," I mean, the people that liked you on the other old
Yeah.
platform are gonna like you on the new one. So I think it's nice seeing that kind of like, oh yeah, this person who I don't know, like subscribes to my newsletter has found me on Blue Sky. That's cool. So it's not. I wouldn't say it's like a dead like start from zero for people like us, I guess.
And I think we can kind of transition into what is Blue Sky Directory as well, but like starter packs really I think solve that problem a lot as well. Like because even when I joined Twitter and things like that, it was very hard. Like how do you even know who else is on the platform unless you know them from somewhere else? If you know them from a website or something like that, and they have a link on there that say, "Hey, I'm active on these other platforms." It's very hard to know who to follow and who you would like to follow as well. And so when I first heard of starter packs, I was like, "This is ingenious,"
Do
because
you,
the
sorry,
yep
just to jump in, do you want to explain what starter packs are? Because
yep
some people might not know. Yeah.
yep. So starter packs. What they were originally intended for, I think, was when you wanted to invite somebody to Blue Sky, rather than just saying, "Hey, you should just go sign up for this social network." The idea was that you created a starter pack, which is a list of users and a list of feeds, things like that. It's a combination of things that you can package up and say, here's a link that you can use that when you sign up, you can see what I recommend that you start with, starter pack. And so it's very easy just to hit follow all. So Justin Jackson, for example, created a starter pack, which is all of the indie hacker kind of type crew. I think he's also got a podcast one as well, an email list one now as well, I think, things like that. So depending on where he's sharing the invite for people to kind of move over, they kind of land on a page that says, rather than starting with an empty timeline, an empty experience, you can automatically follow anywhere up to 150 people can be in a starter pack. So you can start your experience with 150 potentially very similar, very like-minded people. And so your timeline looks really awesome, and you're already engaging with people which have a similar interest with you. And so starter packs, I think, really solve that kind of empty timeline. I'm not going to stick here because I'm not following anybody, so I'm not engaging with anybody. Nobody's engaging with me, and so you just kind of drift back to X and to Twitter and to those other things. Versus, I think now that people are coming and they're already getting to the point where they're following, a few hundred people, and a few hundred people are following them back. It makes the experience feel a lot nicer and kind of welcoming, and hopefully more sticky, because ultimately I think that's going to be the important bit, right? Like, yeah, we can get to 24 million accounts, but how many of those are going to be active in a month? How many of those are going to be active in 6 months? And the more you can solve that problem, then I think we've kind of solved the problem of, like, or we've answered the question of whether Bluesky will actually stick or not.
Yeah, definitely. That's a really good intro, and I'll get on to Bluesky Directory in just a second, I promise. But
No problem.
I think it's a nice difference between Bluesky and, like, not just Twitter, but even things like Threads. Like,
Yeah.
oh man, like the Threads like feed was terrible. I would just get stuff that would be, I guess you could, like, I would describe my feed as kind of like cynical elderly millennials, like myself. But like, I wouldn't see all my like miserable posts from other people. And I was just like, this is like, I gave it my best shot, but I think like Bluesky has really nailed it. You can be like, I mean, I've made a starter pack, you've made some, we've, like, thank you for like sharing my one, by the way. And like, you can make ones for you could make one for, like, I don't know, Laravel developers in New York, or you could make one for like goldfish enthusiasts in Buffalo or whatever. And it's really great because you can, yeah, I think that's one of the many things that was wrong with Threads. You just go on there as a kind of Twitter alternative. You'd go on Threads and you'd be like, well, I have to like manually seek out all these people, and yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the sort of unintended consequences of, like, technology. Because I think, like I said, originally the starter pack idea was more for when you invite somebody to join the platform. But then it also, like, because there's 20 plus million people here, whenever you want to do something new, when you want to learn something new, or you want to, like, expand out of where you are, you have the same problem of, like, who do I follow that talks about this particular topic, or something like that. And so unintended consequences. But starter packs weren't just for people just signing up. They were for anybody who wanted to, like, expand who they were following, but they're interested in AI, or they're interested in email marketing, or they're interested in marketing in general, or some physics or science or chemistry or whatever it is. You can now find recommended groups of people in any subject that you're interested in. And so that's kind of where the idea for Bluesky Directory came in. Was people have made all of these starter packs, not necessarily just like, here's a list of my friends, but these are experts in this particular subject who know a lot. But yeah, they write about this kind of thing a lot, or they're all journalists, or they're all politicians, or whatever it is that you want to follow. But there wasn't a way to, like, just go find them, because the original idea with starter packs was just you share the link, and it was just linked off for your profile if you wanted it. But if you wanted to go find the starter packs of all of the athletes, or the sports people out there, or something like that, there wasn't any way to find that. So when I started Bluesky Directory originally, my idea was just to, like, manually curate, here's some really good starter packs that you can find. And then it kind of dawned on me that, unlike Twitter and X, which is kind of a closed platform, the APIs are kind of locked down and very expensive to use now. Blue Sky is an open platform. It's what they call open social, and although it's not easy, you can get at all of the information that's in the social uh, network. So I ended up writing some scripts, some code that interfaced with the Blue Sky servers and kind of figured out what all of the starter packs that people have created are. And I haven't got all of them yet, but I think I'm about 95% of them now. And so I think there's 110,000 starter packs now that I've found. And so yeah, so I started working on this thing. I think I launched it. There was probably like a few thousand starter packs on there, and then as the user base increased and people started using starter packs because they saw the advantages of them as well. So yeah, so I ended up building both a curated kind of directory of products and tools that I think people will find useful if they're moving to Blue Sky, and also some curated starter packs as well. But it's also kind of morphed into this. Well, we've got things that people are doing on Blue Sky that aren't necessarily very easy to find. Let's make it easier to find them. Starter packs being the main one. Lists and feeds is also something I'm working on right now. And then they have a few other things. I mean, the other thing to touch on, and we can do it now or at some point, like architecturally, Blue Sky isn't set up the same way as some other social networks. And I think it's important to kind of mention that, because one of the reasons that I decided not to go all in on threads or something like that was because fundamentally Blue Sky isn't set up like a normal traditional social network, which one company runs and maintains that and is in charge of all of the ins and outs of how things work. Yeah, ultimately, there is a corporation that is currently, doing most of the work for what we see in terms of Blue Sky. But right underneath the surface, they're working on this thing called App Protocol, which is essentially everything that defines and publicly states how the technology works and how how anybody on the app protocol. So Blue Sky is the first implementation of the app protocol, but because the app protocol is a published and open standard, anybody can also implement it and kind of work with the same protocol on the hood. I mean, a lot of people are comparing it with things like email. There's public standards for email. Anybody who wants to compete with Gmail just needs to implement the same SMTP POP3 protocols, and you can build your own email client, email server, etc. What we're moving towards, if this all kind of works out, is we're building these standards and these protocols for a social media platform that at some point down the road, if somebody else wants to use them and also build very similar services, they can. So if originally the idea was, because Blue Sky was actually incubated originally inside of Twitter, the idea was eventually at some point or other, pre-Elon Musk buying it, was that Twitter would move to the app protocol at some point. They would be the first customer, and then anybody else could also implement. So at some point, if Apple or Google wants to take another stab at making a social network, because I've tried it a few times, they could use the same protocol, and it would still all interoperate, right? You don't just like with email, it's not like I can only send people email to people that use Gmail. Like I said, I email to anybody who has an email address. The same way, if this all works out, even though somebody might be using the Google social network, if they're using the app protocol, as long as as long as I know what their handle is, I can message them, I can see their content, I can follow them, etc. as well.
Yeah, I need to dive in under the hood more, but yeah, my basic understanding was it wasn't unlike something like Threads, which is owned by Meta. You can theoretically in the future, if some evil person bought Blue Sky, who can imagine such a thing? You can be able to transfer your posts and your profile and your followers basically into another service, basically.
Yes. So the idea is that Blue Sky is what they call a private data server, PDS, and The only caveat there is that you have to use your own handle, right? Like, so right now, if you signed up for Bluesky, you would get something psky.social as your handle on the platform. You can't move that account to another PDS because it's tied to that particular PDS. So for example, on Bluesky, I am actually habashariqbal.com. That's the domain that I own, and so that's how you can kind of verify who you are as well. But because I'm using a handle that's independent of the PDS that I'm on, at some point in the future, I could make my own PDS if I wanted to, or if, like I said, if Apple or Google or Facebook, whoever wants to set up their own PDS, I can move my account in its entirety. I can move my content, I can move my following, etc., onto a separate PDS.
So
now,
yeah, sorry, I was just going to jump in and say, would you recommend people? I haven't got around to doing it, but would you recommend people move their handle to like their own domain? And second question, if I do that, what happens to like all my old posts, etc.?
So you're kind of aliasing it. So you would, I think when you add a handle, it's tied to what they call your DID, I think, and they do automatically move all of your posts and following and everything over. So you're not making a new account. I do recommend, since you've been active on the platform for a while, just because once you switch to the handle, I think it frees up the old handle. So just re-register your handle and just kind of point it to whatever your new handle is to kind of make sure people don't. Just because if you link to it off platform and things like that,
I think I saw you do that just so
yes.
like a rando can't just like take my profile and then I don't know whatever.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the old handle won't have any of your old content and things like that on it. But again, like I said, if you link to it from offsite, like I think I moved mine over fairly soon after I signed up, so it wasn't a big deal. Like nobody knew me as the old handle particularly long. But I recommend people use a handle, one, because how do I know it's you, right? Like how do I know it's Pete? Well, if it's linked to your domain, I don't need to have that little verified check mark from Twitter to know that it's really you. It's your domain, so it must be you, right? So that's good. So that's good from a verification standpoint. And then too, like I said, from a future-proofing yourself I'm not saying that we ever will have a reason to leave the platform that we're on or the PDS that we're on, but like at some point it might not even be like you might not leave for a bad reason, right? Like it might not be that Elon purchases that particular service, or Mark Zuckerberg buys it or whatever. It might just be that a different PDS has a different set of features and a different set of functionality that you want to take advantage of. So just like, again, just that example that you used with email, right? Like Google added Gmail and they made it search awesome, so you could search all your past emails and things like that, and they archived it forever and things like that. Like that's a reason to move. It's not always like a bad act that you're like trying to run away from. Sometimes you're moving towards something that's improving your experience and things like that. And so I think, again, that's the advantage of this open platform, because like there's already a couple of clients that have features that the Bluesky web React Native app don't have. For example, I think there's an app that people have been asking for, draft posts, and so the official client, the official web interface doesn't have that, but some other clients have already implemented that. So you can already have that functionality. Now that doesn't mean you have to move to a new PDS entirely, but we don't know what's coming, right? Like at some point down the road, you might want to move to a PDS because of the experience, because of the functionality, rather than just because I don't want to be here anymore.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. So yeah, I'll add that to my to-do list to change my handle. So thanks for explaining that. One other thing about the like Bluesky directory. So it's kind of like a list of, I think it started out as a list of starter packs. Now you've got other like tools that devs can use. I see it's really fun because I see a lot of people like Mark Colbrook and people like doing things like Twitter chart, Twitter charts, Blue Sky charts, and Blue Sky counter is like the old Twitter counter, so you can see your
Yeah.
following go up. Yeah, it's really fun because basically anything that worked on Twitter, you can make in Blue Sky, and he's doing well from that. But what I was gonna ask was, how are you? I think you've got a few kind of tiny like paid ads at the
Mhm.
top of Blue Sky Directory. Is that the way you're monetizing it at the moment?
Yeah, honestly, I didn't really have any plans to monetize it at all. Initially, it was just going to be a very, very low cost platform to run because directories are very, very cheap and affordable to run. And I was just, I wanted to build something for the community. That's kind of how I find out how platforms work. I find out how communities work. I held something for them,
Hmm.
and then I become, a part of it. And so yeah, so my original idea was just to build something that would be of use, but it wouldn't be very expensive. It wouldn't take very long to run. And so I was just going to operate it, and it would just be there, and it would just exist, and there wouldn't be a need to kind of make money from it because it wouldn't be a very expensive thing to run. Um, Unfortunately, things have morphed a little bit in terms of, like, it went from being like a curated directory of a few hundred or a few thousand things. It's now got, combined across all of the different entities. There's probably 200,000 different things that I have to track, and scripts
Yeah.
to update them and maintain them. And so it's not a massive cost, but it's significant enough where it's like, if I can get some help in terms of paying the bills, then
Mm.
that's fantastic. But yeah, I think primarily it's going to be like, it's like any directory with enough with enough traffic, people will pay to be higher up at the list and to,
Yeah.
to kind of be visible on it. It has been, I mean, aside from the explosion in the amount of information I've collected, I happen to be in the right place at the right time, right? Like,
Yeah.
as I mentioned, after the election, people were like trying to find a new platform. They found Blue Sky, and so there was a lot of press, like the New York Times, The Verge, all of these rather big publications have written about Blue Sky, and they all happen to mention, oh, there's this starter pack
Oh wow, really?
directory that you can use to find, people that you might want to follow and engage with and things like
That's
that.
cool.
And so yeah, so in the last month, and I've been sharing this all, kind of build in public as well, but it's had more than 500,000 people come to the site,
Yeah.
since it's launched. And like I said, I was not expecting that. Like, normally, again, in terms of like server capacity and how many servers you need and things like that, I was thinking, hey, it's just a little directory. I don't need lots of servers. It's going to get a few thousand people come to it every week, every month. But, now I'm getting 20,000 people come to it each day right now.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so that all kind of adds up. And so if there's a way to help offset those costs, then that's really what I'm looking for advertising for.
Yeah. I might have so like I do ghostwriting and I do like writing like social media for like tech founders mostly. So yeah, I need to make a Blue Sky page because I've been doing it for Twitter and LinkedIn. I need to
Yeah,
make a Blue Sky ghostwriter page. So I might message you after this to arrange that
absolutely.
at some point. Um, but yeah, it seems like it's really amazing timing though because I mean, I think that sometimes it's just like, it's kind of like, and Justin Jackson talks about water-based analogies a lot, but if you can
Yep.
like ride the wave
Right
at
away.
just the right time, just when it's breaking, it's like, yeah, right place, right time. I had seen that I'd seen your traffic was like 600,000 and I was like, wow, that's geez Louise.
Yeah, I think officially I launched the directory on, I think it was October I think I was writing this down because I'm going to do like a recap post, but officially I made the website public on October the 28th. So in 2 days will be like the official 1 month anniversary, and I think I will have passed and this is underreporting because of the way that the
Mm.
site works, but 1 million page views at least
Nice.
by the time I hit by the time I hit the first month.
That's really sick. I should say I've got a little blue sky idea of my own. It's not going to be the same as yours, but it's in the same ballpark. But I'll let you know when it's released.
No, and I think I just posted this on the platform, like, because there's other people building starter pack
Mm.
directories and blue sky directories and things like that. I think it's awesome. Like, yes, it makes my life a little bit harder because I've got more people to compete with, and
Mm.
for eyeballs and attention and things like that. But ultimately, for Blue Sky to succeed, it needs people here, it needs people active, it needs people
Mm.
working on stuff. It needs, if we don't have that vibrant ecosystem, we're not going to get people to come here and use the platform every day, every week, every month.
Yeah.
And so it is a little bit worrying to see 10 other people making a Blue Sky starter pack directory. But if we go from 22 million to 100 million users in the space of the next year, say,
Yeah.
there's more than enough room for all of us, right? Like, I don't need
Definitely.
100% of market share. I'm happy with whatever market share I get. I'm lucky enough where I started early enough that, I've already, like, the website, for example, has a 39 domain rating already
Jeez.
on Ahrefs and things like that. Like, I was fortunate. I was in the right place at the right time. I got all those backlinks from the New York Times and Verge and all those
Yeah, man.
places. That's really helped me get the traction that I need. Like, I've already had 7,000 clicks from Google search, just people
Yeah.
searching for blue sky stuff. I think I'll be fine. Like, yes, it's not going to stay to the level that it is now. It's going to come down because that's the normal pattern. You go up, you
Yeah.
go down. You don't come down to where you started. Like, you come down to a higher level, and then you wait for the next surge to come in as more people sign up and things like that. So, happy to see other people building stuff, because the more people build stuff, the more people are active here, makes it much more likely that we'll go from that 22, 24 million to 50 million users, 100 million users, hopefully, at some point.
Yeah. Don't I should say, like, I'm not gonna rip you off. I'm not gonna be like blue sky directories plural and just like change the color blue slightly or something. It's gonna be a different thing. It's gonna be a
Yeah.
different thing. But like, you raised a very, very good point there about, like, I'd quite like to talk about the competition thing, because the thing I always find really strange, like, me and you have both been in the indie hacker world for a long time, yourself like longer, a lot longer than I have, but I find it really strange where in a city you could have like one cafe, and another part of town there's another cafe, and no one would ever say, hey, my friend owns a cafe on the west side of town, but you just opened one on the east side of town. How dare you, you terrible person? Whereas that kind of mentality seems to exist, especially in like the indie hacker bootstrapper world. Do you have any views on like
Uh,
competing and yeah, stuff
yeah,
like that?
I think there's a difference between competing and a difference between, like, just outright copying and theft.
Yeah,
Obviously, yeah, people are just gonna, like, copy your HTML and your website and put it up as an alternative, then that sucks, right?
yeah, I agree.
Um, but if somebody's going to say, "Look, I love your idea, but I've got this, thought about how we can improve on it, and we can make it a much better experience for the user," like, like, one person might open a cafe, person might open a cat cafe,
Yeah,
um, then that's awesome, right? Like, it's trying to solve the same problem, but in a unique way. And I think that's the kind of competition that we need,
mm,
because not only will it make it better for the end user, but it also might give me some ideas. Maybe I'll have not cat cafe, but maybe one day a week we'll have cats at the cafe instead, just to give the customers what they want. Because I'm
yeah,
assuming customers don't want cats in their tea every day, but but they might occasionally. So yeah,
yeah,
so it is. I struggle with this a little bit too, just from the other side, in terms of, like, I see somebody has a website in a particular niche in a particular subject area. I'm like, I had an idea that was kind of like that, but I don't want to operate in that space now because somebody else took the idea first. I really struggled with that for a long time, to be honest, because one, I just like working on new things, I think. So I mean, honestly, if I hadn't built Bluesky Directory when I did, if I came to the platform now and I saw 10 people with Bluesky directories ready, I probably wouldn't work on it. Just
Yeah.
because it's like, this is saturated. It's probably not at this point. Honestly, it's probably not. With 22 million people on the platform, it's not. Whatever you build is early at this point. But in my mind, at least, I'm like, yeah, there's already people doing that. Why would I like waste my time doing something that 10 other people are already working on?
Yeah.
But I do think that you have to think about like what is important to you, right? Like what's the problem that you're solving? And in some ways, if that's something that you're passionate about, it doesn't matter if there's one person doing the same thing or zero people doing the same thing or 20 people doing the same thing. If it's something that you're more passionate about than those 20 other people, it's absolutely fine to kind of build in the same space. Get, get ideas, be inspired by what other people are doing, but do your own thing as well.
Yeah, I think like it's funny, like I totally empathize with what you were saying. Like I really struggle even with things like, oh yeah, someone has a productized service and they're like, oh, maybe I should do that, add that as a service. It's like millions of people do that.
Yes.
It's not a bad thing. I guess it'd be like if a programmer would be like, but there's already people doing like Laravel agencies. I can't do what, like no one would ever say that. So I think it
I,
is a irrational irrational feeling for sure.
I think it is a little bit different online as well. Like, you know, with your idea about like with the cafe on the west side of town and the east side of town, that almost feels like it's a new idea, right? Like, is
Mm,
it, no,
yeah.
that was on the east side. This is a west side cafe versus here. It feels like everything's next door. Like this feels like
Yeah,
you're
that's
opening.
true.
It feels like you're opening a cafe right next door to the person who already has one
That
because it's the internet and everything is like
yeah.
right next to each other.
That's yeah. I think my analogy would have been better if it was like the cafe around the corner. But
Right.
yeah, I don't know. I think it is hard. It can be hard as well because the internet can make the world feel like a really small place. And I think it is quite common on social media for people like I've seen this even not with my own products, but I've like mentioned like say analytics tool and people will be like, how's this different from this other one? And it's like, well, like there's a light to be more than one. Whereas I think I
Right.
don't know why, but it's a really internet specific thing that it's like, and I don't know if it's because people get culty and people are like, oh, my friend like Jeff makes this analytics tool. How dare you compete with him? It might be something like that, but for some reason we get really weird about people competing in the internet space, but people don't feel that in like say like IRL businesses like cafes and stuff like that.
I mean, I think they probably do. To be honest with you, like we don't think about it from a consumer standpoint, right? Like I love the fact that there's a Starbucks and a Dunkin' Donuts and whatever local cafe. There's Pocalisa's Uncommon Ground. There's like 10 different coffee spots in town that I frequent at different instances. So from a consumer standpoint, I think it's awesome to have the choice and the options and stuff. I'm sure the people that run each one of those coffee places absolutely hate it when a new one announces that
Yeah,
they're opening in town, right? So I think from an internet standpoint, like we're the people making those services. So from an operator standpoint, I'm sure we have the same feeling as those people that run the
yeah,
cafes and things like that. But from a consumer standpoint, as a consumer of those things, it's fantastic. I think that's the way that I try and imagine these things now. Is like I'm not selling to the person running the other cafe. I'm selling to the person who's buying the coffee. And the
yeah,
same thing with here. Like I'm building a service for the people who are joining Blue Sky, not for the other indie hacker, indie makers who are also making these things, right? So it's all about reach ultimately, I guess. But yeah, so I think that again, the mindset wise, it's always like I think that is also part of the problem with the indie hacker scene, right? Like a lot of indie hackers build products to sell to other indie hackers, And so when you see competition, it's like, oh my God, that's awful. But
Yeah.
when your audience is the general public in terms of like something like the Blue Sky Directory, because I was like, well, if I build an indie hacker product, I've got like 10,000 people that might be interested in this thing. If I build for Blue Sky, I know one, I've got 22 million people because that's how many people on the platform. And again, that's just getting started. Like that 22 million could become 100 million, could become 200 million, could become, 500 million people in a few years. So always try and think about scope and scale as well.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's a very good point about the like I've literally just come back from a like an independent cafe where I spent half my money. And that yeah, you're right. I think the owner would not be totally like chill if another cafe opened just down the street. So yeah, that's a good point. I maybe like I had a bit maybe a bit of a utopian naive idea. But I think it is that getting back to like I think whenever there's market demand, there's like more
Yeah,
players are going to come in and
can't stop it.
satisfy. So yeah, you can't be like, well, how dare you, etc., etc.
Well, I mean, and think about like there's it's obviously a little bit different with the cafe and stuff. Like there, people are only going to drink certain number of amount of coffee every day, things like that. But on the internet, at least you're open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But also from a building standpoint, like it's only me building Blue Sky Directory. I've a job that I need to do. There's only so many hours in the day that I can improve the product and add features, add functionality. Other people are going to have more time, less time, as well. So the more people that are building things, the more advantageous it will be that we'll get more features, more functionality that the big audience actually wants as well. So that's always, to me, is always the tough bit, is how do you balance how much time you spend on something versus, what's the value that you're going to get out of it at the end of the day as well. But so online world is always a little bit. You always have to twist your mind a little bit in terms of how you think about things, because we always try and think about like local stores and things like that, but online doesn't quite work like that, because normally you're providing a service or a product which people will almost, they will leave the store with essentially, versus online, you don't have to think about how many people can you service in an hour, because how many ovens you have, because how many people you have working in the restaurant or the cafe or whatever. You can always add more servers, right? You can always service more people. But all of that comes at an expense as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is also reminding me, like, I sometimes fantasize about opening a cafe, and that then I'm like, oh my God, it'd be so hard, and there's like so much harder than an online business.
A
I think,
startup costs insane as well.
yeah, I think that'll be like if and when I get rich and I'm like financially independent, don't ever have to work, it can be like a hobby which I can afford to lose money on. But I think like there was a yeah, I'm meandering, but there's a cafe nearby, and it shut and opened and shut within like a month or so. And I heard that they spent about like £30,000, so about $40,000. It's a lot of money to lose in like 1 month versus like bootstrapping.
I mean, that's obviously the nice thing about doing stuff online. Like, other than like for the price of a domain, the price of hosting, and if you're an engineer like me who can build his own stuff, like, it's just the cost of your time. So you have to think about what the opportunity cost is there in terms of how long you're going to spend to build that thing. But for $100, you can have a website up and running in
Yeah,
24 hours if you want to. You
yeah.
don't have to spend the 30 or 40,000. And then I'm assuming they would also have to pay staff and watch your margins
Oh
and all that
yeah.
kind of stuff as well. So it's I come from a family that used to run. We had three like convenience stores, they would call them in the US, like little supermarket shops. And understanding margins was something that you really had to think about a lot, because even though you were open 8 in the morning till 8 at night, but you had to, what was the cost of goods that you had to put them on the shelf, you had to run them through the checkout, and how much money do you make at the end of the day. That's why everybody loves internet online. Like margins in supermarket world are like 20% maybe,
Mm.
maybe if you're really good, a little bit higher than that. But margins on the internet on SaaS is like 80%. It's just
Yeah.
80, even higher than that in some instances. That's why people kind of love it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. With my ghostwriting, it's really just my time. I've got
Right.
like, a couple of websites that don't cost very much to make, to like host each month, and yeah, it's a very, very high profit business. Getting on to like how you build the sites, you're a bit of a Laravel fanboy, I gather.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk us through like why? Do you want to like make a case for Laravel? Es- es-
No, no.
espe- Especially maybe if someone's like maybe newer to
Right.
entrepreneurship and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, that to me, I mean, I've always been what we call platform agnostic, right?
Yeah.
I've always said you use the right tool for whatever you want to do. So I've been fortunate. I've been building web stuff since 1995 was like when I first built something for the web. I was still in university. I was building stuff and I was building stuff. So I've seen the evolution of just about everything. Like just static
Yeah.
HTML was the only, that's the way you built stuff. There wasn't this thing called CSS even. It was just literally just HTML, and that was how you built stuff. And then I've seen the migration to like server side rendering and all sorts of. I started with C was my first language. I actually built an Apache plugin in C to render HTML. That was the first job I ever had. But then, I moved to Java and I've done stuff in Ruby on Rails and Next and React. And I've been fortunate enough to be exposed to all the different technologies and understand that the best technology is the one that you already know because you already know how to do things. And when you're building a new product, a new company, a new startup, the less things that you have to learn and figure out, the more advantage that you have because you already know how to do half the things that other people are still kind of working out. So I always tell people, look, it's hard enough to build a product without you having to learn new things along the way. If you know how to use Ruby on Rails, you know how to do it in React on Next, run with that. Just don't worry about that because your first primary purpose in terms of an enterprise, in terms of a startup, is to show that there's a demand for the thing that you're building and that you can service that demand. If you can build the product that people actually want, so essentially, and if you can show that, you can always figure out, rebuild it later. You can change the stack. I've worked on countless products where we built the MVP in one language and then we pivoted completely because we realized we needed Python or JavaScript, whatever it was, to be able to scale to the levels that we needed at the time. Now I would probably just stick to Laravel anyway, but that's all other discussion. But yeah, so that's like if you can show that you're making money, if you can show that there's a demand for your product, then that opens up more options for you to hire people who have the skills that you don't have or to do the things that you don't want to do instead. That all being said, I love Laravel. I think it's a fantastic framework. I think I wouldn't have been able to build Bluesky Directory to grow the way that it has over the last month if I wasn't using it. And also to the point where from a hosting perspective too, right? Like, because that was one of the reasons I ran into some problems over the last couple of weeks was I went from a few hundred products in the database to now, like I said, there's like 110,000 starter packs alone
Jeez.
in the database. How do you search through 110,000 starter packs? Like
Yeah.
there's ways that Laravel through its ecosystem makes that much easier. I use a package called Scout, for example, that allows me to do search in a much more efficient way than just querying MySQL directly and things like that. I was able to implement that in about 3 hours on Saturday night because Jay, the CEO of Bluesky, tweeted about or posted, I'm not called tweets, posted
Yeah.
about Bluesky Directory, and that kind of
Wow.
blew up the server. And so in about 3 hours, I was able to redo how search works. And now I went from a site being down or really, really slow to respond, to now search takes like a fraction of a second now. Um,
Amazing.
so I've been using Laravel since before it was officially 1.0, like, early versions that Taylor posted out there, and I've seen the evolution. It's on what, version 11 now, I think. I signed up for Forge, which is the hosting platform that they made originally as soon as he announced it, because that was the thing that I hated, was that how do I set up a server? How do I get
Mm.
hosting working? Solve that problem for me. I never have to worry about that now. I just go into Forge, point click, add a server. It installs all of the web servers, database servers, firewall rules, everything that I need to put on the server. It handles all of that for me. And I can spin up projects in a fraction of the time that I used to.
That's sick, man. Yeah, like is for the server, is that literally like the same kind of way well, it is with Heroku, where I've heard people joke about it's just like git push main, like, it's
So
literally just like point and click kind of thing.
it's not quite that easy yet, but they're working on Laravel Cloud, which they
Right.
announced at HaraCon in the fall. They've started rolling invites out. I haven't received one yet. I'm still a bit upset about that. I wanted one, but I haven't got one. But yeah, so that will be as simple as you have your GitHub repo or your repo, wherever it is. You can
Mm.
basically just say, I want to deploy this app. It will do everything for you.
Yes, nice.
So how Forge works right now is you basically have to pick, like, okay, where's this hosted?
Yeah.
Is this something on DigitalOcean, or is this an AWS server? So you basically say, I want to make a new server, but it's literally, you just go and you link your account to AWS if you want to. You
Mm.
get your API keys and things like that. You say you want to add a new server, and it will then, like I said, it will provision the server for you with whichever service provider, Hertzner,
Mm.
um, DigitalOcean, AWS. It doesn't care. And then so it'll install all the software packages that it needs in terms of Nginx and PHP and PHP FPM and all of those things that most people don't care about. And then once that server's spun up, you can then say, I want to add a site. So you say, this is the domain I want to use for this particular site, and here's the repo that I want to use. And then again, it will then configure Nginx. It will do everything in the web server and everything to install that for you, and then you're live essentially at that point. So yeah, it's not quite as easy as Heroku, because that's like
Yeah.
a pass. It's a
Yeah.
platform as a service. Laravel Cloud, I think, will be that easy. But even with Forge, it's still like 2 or 3 clicks and you're there.
Nice. Nice. That's cool. And you don't get any, I take it you don't get any of like the surprise big bills, like.
Well, so that's one reason I don't like things like Heroku, because again, you can configure it to auto scale. So if you get enough traffic, they will add more and more servers for you to be able to handle that load. And then you may well at the end of the month get like, why am I getting a $5,000 bill because the
Yeah.
traffic went up so much? With stuff like Forge, you're basically, because it's your server, you've managed it, you've said how big you want it to be. Every month
Mm. Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
fixed cost.
So it's a VPS. So it's
Yeah,
like, yeah, gotcha.
but you can, like pre this Saturday where I was scrambling, like even pre that, like I had to increase the size of my server. So,
Yeah.
but again, that was just logging in and saying, I just want to upsize my server. So
Nice.
it wasn't like a big heavy lift in terms of making it happen. You have about 10 minutes of time where where your site's offline, because you take it down, you upsize it, and you just spin it back up again, and it's all working the way that it was. So,
Yeah.
depending on how popular your website is and how much traffic you're getting, you know, like normally I just wait till 11 o'clock at night Eastern time, and I've got a few hundred people maybe in that 20-minute window that will see a message that the site's offline. But
Yeah.
under normal circumstances where I have much lower traffic sites, I can take it down and nobody will care that it's not there.
Yeah. So how can you do you want to share like what happens if you get like 500 when you get like a month like you go viral and you get 500,000 visits, like what's that costing you roughly
Yeah,
before it?
so when I first launched the site, like I said, it was just on a server that I already had, just for my other side projects
Mm,
and things like that. So it didn't cost me anything at all in terms of
yeah.
extra cost. I so that I think I was paying $20 a month for, just for
Yeah.
all of my other projects. I doubled the size of it after about 2 weeks because it was just getting so much traffic that it
Mm,
needed it. So I went to paying $40 a month instead. And so now, with the search and stuff, I've basically broken it up into three different parts right now. So there's like the web server is on its own server, the database is on its own server, and then the search runs on its own server.
cool.
And they're all costing me about $40 a month each. So it's going to cost
All
me
right.
about
Okay.
$120 a month uh,
Yeah.
to be able to run that, which is, it's not insignificant, but it's not insane either.
I can, yeah, it's stuff like that where I'm like, I can see why people are pissed off about serverless, like how much, and or I don't know, like some no code platforms are just like, you know, yeah, $20 a month per website, whereas you could have a server for $20 and have, you
Oh
know,
yeah, like for
multiple.
that, I mean, like I've been spending, like, as you mentioned earlier, I've got, like 120 odd side projects I've built over the years. I think I've been spending combined $100 a month to host all of those.
Jeez, yeah,
And that's because,
that's
one, because they're not getting that much traffic, so it's not a big deal, right? But I'm not paying per site, right? Like, I'm paying per server, and I can
yeah,
have 15, 20, 30 projects on one server if it's not a very active project in terms of visits. Like, I think like, obviously I've had some experience with this. Like, I can build fairly performant sites without really thinking about it. So
yeah,
where most people would struggle to kind of put a site together that isn't going to have scaling issues, like, I was surprised even on the server that I had. Like, it got to the point where I think I had uh, on that $20 a month server, for example, it had still done 70,000 visits in a day just on that one server.
wow,
And that's 70,000 visits. That's 150,000 page views. On a server that's running with 10 other sites as well.
yeah, that's awesome, man. I think like yeah, that's really good. I think it goes to show the benefits in some ways of like yeah, of actually coding and having your own servers versus like yeah, having
I mean,
everything like
to
on
some
another
degree, it
one.
depends, right? Like, if you're still figuring stuff out, if you don't know if the idea is going to work and things like that, like, it's much faster and quicker just to use, like, in the no code platform and things like that.
Mm,
Like, it's the time to market that's important, right? Like, if you can get your idea in front of people in hours, minutes, then you should absolutely do that. And
yeah,
then, as you see the traction come, rather than trying to stick with the platform just because you started there, as I said, like, I've re-architected, rebuilt things from scratch once you know that it will work. But you're going to iterate so many ideas and try so many things. The faster you can iterate on them at the beginning, the easier it becomes. And once you get to the point where, yeah, you're going to have some pain, you're gonna have some struggle. Like, how do I convert what I started with to where I want to be? But at least you haven't wasted 6 months to build something that
yeah.
you don't even know if the market wants.
Yeah, I think like I mean we can come on to that just now, but yeah, I think that's the one of the biggest problems is yeah, like I guess people that are new to entrepreneurship spending like I know and I like I think everyone has that phase where you build something for 6 months or whatever and then you launch it and like nobody wants to pay for it. What
Yep.
or nobody wants to use it. Like what do you have any yeah, do you have any tips for like how to I don't know how to build faster or how to like get out of that phase of like I guess building in secret.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's really just two different approaches to this that I've seen in the past. And I think what Justin Jackson says is really, really valid, especially for people who are first time entrepreneurs and things like that. Like, seeing demand that exists already and then building for it kind of solves a lot of those issues, right? Like rather than trying to invent something new, which you don't know if the market wants, if the market needs, if people will pay to use this thing. I always find when you build something new that there's a certain hidden cost of education that you have to partake in. Like with the first social networks, there was a certain amount of education that people
Mm.
had to do in terms of like, why would I post what I'm eating? Like,
Yeah.
like who
Yeah.
cares? But obviously now it's like second nature. Now if you see a social network, you're like, okay, I understand what it is. I don't need to be sold on the idea. Maybe you have to be sold on the features and why is Blue Sky different than X and Threads and those kind of things. But yeah, don't be sold on the idea of using the product itself. So yeah, so if you're first time entrepreneur, first time founder, don't invent something because it's really hard to tell people. It's very hard to sell people on something that you're inventing. It just takes time and effort and money that most people who are doing this thing for the first time just haven't got. The other way is, and this is why I've done stuff in the past, is you have a day job. Just keep your day job as long as you can and just experiment with stuff in the evenings, weekends, things like that. There, if nobody wants to buy it, fine. You've still paid your bills. You've still got money in the bank, hopefully. You've still got healthcare, all of those
Mm.
things. If you want to like just experiment and see what the future might look like and things like that, treat it like it's a side project, like it's a hobby almost. I mean, a lot of hobbies, a lot of side projects turn into something way more significant, and that's fantastic if they do. But a lot of hobbies, a lot of side projects just end up in the trash can, and that's okay too. But you don't want to like risk your financial security, your family's health, your health, all of those things. Like, have
Yeah.
that security around you. I think so that to me, I think is always the sort of the thing. If you can show demand exists for something and you want to build that, I think that's probably the easiest way. But if you're like more like I want to see where my mind wanders, then just wander in the evenings, wander on the weekends as opposed
You
to
you're saying we
working on
shouldn't
stuff.
all move to Bali with like $500 in our pocket and just expect to instantly become successful and pay all our bills and be rich overnight?
Well, I mean, I think I mean
What
that's a
madness!
valid that's I mean it all depends on your expenses, right?
Yeah.
Like I just said, like make sure if you've got a family and you've got to cover all your got to buy a house and a car and
Yeah.
like that. If you're 19 years old, you decided not to go to college and you want to move to if you want to move to Southwest or Southeast Asia for the next couple of years where your living expenses are like $300 a month, then the amount of money that you have to make isn't the same either,
Yeah.
right?
I
So it's
agree.
all about how much money you need to make to cover what your expenses are. I couldn't live on $300 a month, but some other people could. but
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think you have to understand where you are, what your safety net looks like. Is well, like what happens if it all fails? Can you go back to your parents' house and kind of move into your old room, right? Like versus I've got my family. Well, like I don't think I've got my wife and my kids. I don't think my my parents are going to be happy with us all squeezing into that one room anymore.
Yeah, I think no, that's a very good point you make about risk tolerance and or not just
Yeah.
tolerance, but your situation.
Yeah.
I mean, I sounded a bit cynical there, but I do know young people that have moved abroad and they don't have any dependents, they don't have any
It's still
responsibilities.
hard.
They can do that. But I think
It's still hard.
oh yeah, yeah, it is. It is. But yeah, I think
But it's also, sorry, not to interrupt, but it's also about like, what's your runway, right? Like, if you can put a couple of thousand in the bank and then move to Bali, that's your living expenses for like 6 months to a year, right? Like, I mean, yeah, depending on kind of how much you splurge out there, and also how much you make, right? Like, if you can make $100 from ads, then that covers half your expenses, and your runway just extends as well. And again, if you're going to quit your job and you're making $100,000 a year or whatever it is, to replace that is super hard. So yeah, it's all about, like you said, risk tolerance, but also understanding how quickly your project, your startup, your company needs to make money if you're not going to take investment from somebody. Taking investment from somebody opens up a whole other can of worms anyway that I think most people should stay away from, especially on their first idea. But yeah, so I think that's absolutely, people see the internet celebrities, they think it's easy, I'll just go and post a video on TikTok and it will get millions of impressions and I'll be rich. But that's not how life works.
Definitely. Just yeah, I'll just ask a couple more questions. But like, you're kind of so you've got a you can fill us in, but you've sort of got a day job. I guess you're like a one man agency. Is that fair to say?
So I was, until last year about this time, I was working at a fintech startup. Just I was employee number one there, and yeah, we did good. And then just after 4 years, I was at that startup for 4 years. I was just trying to figure out what was new, what's next, and never really found like the new company that I wanted to join. But over the years, I've made some contacts, and so I had people who I reached out to and said, "Hey, if you needed some extra pair of hands on what you're working on, if you have some projects that you would like me to work on, I have some time." And so that kind of worked out for me. I've got 3 customers right now that I'm kind of working with on a regular basis, and that pays the mortgage and the car bills and the health insurance costs and all of that stuff. And then I use my time on nights and weekends to experiment and see just exactly what I outlined in terms of, just let my mind wander. What's this blue sky thing? Oh, maybe I can
Yeah.
build something for it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I guess like have you like I think I know the question to this, but answer to this, but have you ever thought of like hiring people and setting up more of like I know a like I guess an agency model where you're selling people's time basically like oh Jeff's a great coder so hire like Mubs digital agency and I can sell Jeff's time etc. Or
I hate managing people.
sure that's what I
It's the
thought you'd
short
say.
answer.
Yeah, yeah.
I hate managing people. Like, and this is one of the reasons that even when I worked at startups, I leave after a certain number of years because the startups get to be a certain size, and then when you've been there from the beginning, people expect you to move into a management role and
Mm,
manage people and things like that. And I hate managing people. And so yeah, so it's something that I mean I've done once in the past. Like I worked with so I was the engineering side of an agency, and there was a design side of the agency with which I started with a friend of mine called Alex. And we ended up being about, through freelancers and stuff, there was 6 or 7 people working for us, where we were pitching clients, and then we were kind of farming the work out and stuff like that. I did that in the early noughts, and I just it's just not for me. Like, I still like to have my hands in code. I still like to build things. I still like to understand the requirements and then follow through on the execution of those projects and things like that. And so it's just not, are you running an agency or are you doing the work of the agency? And I would rather be doing the work of the agency rather than the work of running the agency.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I think like I'm at a kind of pivotal point with my like social media ghostwriting where I'm like, do I? Because there's only so many hours I can do.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, well, do I grow it more by hiring people, or do I keep it just myself and do like a handful of clients like yourself, and maybe I don't know, maybe have other projects as well. Um, yeah,
Yeah,
another.
I was just gonna say, there's a hard part with that is just like understanding what the limits of the hourly are, because ultimately that's it, right? Like, there's only a certain number of days in the hour that you work, that you can
Yeah.
work. If you can charge enough per hour where you're comfortable, where you're set, then then less overhead, less people to manage, less risk. And what happens if that person's sick for a week and they can't work there? How do you fill their, like,
Yeah.
there's just lots of things that come up that you don't think about from a utopian standpoint. It's just going to be easy, right? Like I'm going to hire 5 people, I'm going to get 5 projects, they're going to
Yeah.
do them, and it's all going to be perfect. But again, life doesn't quite work out quite as easily as that.
Yeah, I was talking to my good friend Amar from ZenMade like yesterday, I think, and even and yeah, he was kind of saying a similar thing about people always think about hiring of like, oh well, hiring will solve all my problems, and we'll hire one person and but you never see like just what you're saying, you never see the thing of like, well, and I've had this before. I worked with a couple of freelancers briefly, and some of them were really good, but some of them were just like totally late, could not hit a deadline. You have to recruit them, you have to like fire them usually at some
Yep.
point. So I guess that's all like things that takes away from time that if it's
Yep.
just you, like I know I'm going to hit a deadline, I can, you don't, yeah, not
I
relying
think
on other
the
people.
I think the way that I do it, I mean, this is very high level, but like I plan to sell 80% of my time. So that's like if there's a 40-hour week, I plan to sell 80% of my time. And I think when you end up in agency world, you basically have to plan along the same lines in terms of if I'm going to have a freelancer, I have to sell 60% of their time. But that 60% should cover the cost of whatever I'm paying them. But just assume that 40 other percent either would just be waste because people won't be able to work for a certain amount of time, or they won't be able to execute the way that you expect them to because of they have to wait for somebody to give them something or whatever, right? Like there's just lots of reasons why people aren't going to be as productive as they can be. And so it's all about, I mean, agency is all about like cash flow essentially, right? In
Yeah.
terms of I'm going to get this amount of money from the customer for this amount of work. Now, how many people do I need to service that? And what do I do if I hire all these people, but then what happens when this project finishes? Like, what if I don't have another project lined up immediately to start when this project finishes? Am I just going to fire all those people, or do I have to keep them on salary for a
Yeah.
while? Like how does that work? And if they're just freelancers, then they're going to go find other work from other people. They're not going to be around for me when I need them and things like that. It's all about cash flow and timing, and that to me was like the worst business model ever because it's like insanely difficult to get it right, and there's just a lot of excess capacity that you have to plan for. And just even starting projects, like you can't start them when you want to start them because you're still working on another project, or the people are busy with other things and things like that. It was just a you kind of have to live in like Kanban flows, and
Hmm.
like understanding the flowchart models of like who's available to work on this project and when, and how much is this going to cost, and if they want to start now, can I charge them extra, and all sorts of things like that. And I was just like, no, 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 I don't want to do this. I just want to talk to one person. They can tell me what they want me to build, and then I can build it. That was it.
Nice. Yep, that makes a little sense. Yeah, I think final thing I was going to ask was you seem to be someone that, like, you obviously love building and making products. I think sometimes you've talked in podcasts about as a hobby, like sometimes you're like, oh, I want to make this, like, I don't know, like this database of podcasts or this database of movies. I'm going to build it. Are you like, how is AI changing how you're coding? Are you still like are you just like, oh yeah, I can just ask cursor how to do something, or is that like horrible to you? Do you want to like code everything yourself?
Well, no, I mean, like, I leverage libraries and I leverage, Stack Overflow to
Yeah,
solve
true,
problems and
true.
bugs and things like that. So I'm not as bullish as a lot of people are on AI. I think it's good, and if you don't have any other option, it's fantastic, right? Like if I didn't know how to code, or I was just starting to code, and I know some of the fundamentals, but I don't know everything that I need to know. It's a great way to have somebody kind of show you what you should be doing.
Mm,
So I think it's great in certain circumstances. It's also just because of the way that the models have been trained. It's great for some languages. Is for like the Pythons and the JavaScripts of the world, not so good for other languages because they just haven't been trained
Yeah.
as well on those particular
Does that
languages.
include PHP and Laravel?
It's okay for PHP and Laravel. Again, the problem is that um, I think the thing that people forget is that we use a lot. I mean, not just in PHP and Laravel, but especially actually in JavaScript world, there's such a package of dependencies that you can, oh, I need this package for this, and I need this package for that, and um, I don't think the LLMs are quite good enough yet to understand the ecosystem and how well they plug together to do it. Like they're great for like building interfaces
Right.
because like you use shared CDS, shared, like there's a framework library, you use that one library and it builds beautiful interfaces for you.
Yeah.
But that's the interface, like to build it so that all works. You usually end up having to use like 20 other back-endy interfacey packages, and so it can do it depending on, look, it depends on what you're trying to build, right? If you're trying to build something very, very, very simple that somebody's already built and it's already
Yeah.
out there, but you want to tweak it a little bit, then AI is fantastic for that, right? Because it's just going to clone that repo and then figure out what it needs to change. But if you want to build something like even like something simple like the Bluesky directory, AI would have been great for the first version of that because it was just a simple directory with a list of products with a title and an image and things like that. But then the minute I was like, oh, I actually can pull this from the Bluesky fire hose. I'm pretty sure AIs don't know what the Bluesky fire hose is.
Yeah, that's true. That's
Things
true.
like that. So I'm bullish on AI as an assistant. I'm not bullish on AI as like replacing engineers and it's going to make me more efficient. Like I said, like I used to Google and search for solutions or ideas about how I could approach something. Now I can do that with AI. I'm not going to trust everything it says just out of the box, but
Yeah.
as somebody who's got the sort of technical skills to understand what AI is telling me, I understand the implications of what it's saying I should do and shouldn't do. My worry is that there's a lot of people out there who haven't got any technical skills whatsoever, and they're asking AI to do this stuff, and it's great. It looks like it works, but does it actually do everything that you want it to? And does it
Yeah.
handle all the use cases where you give it bad information? And what do you do in those situations and circumstances? And also, I think the thing that really people haven't really thought about is like, how do you upgrade stuff, right? Like, if there's a new version of React comes out, if there's a new version of Node comes out, there's a new version of an underlying package that you use. How long is it going to take for AI to get trained on those new packages, new versions? Is it going to understand how you move from one version to the next and things like that? So I think there's going to be an inherent like platform. How do you maintain these projects that have been built with AI and kind of continue to add features functionality? Do you just ultimately have to hire somebody who can handle that, or will the AIs be able to catch up and be able to handle all of those things as well?
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a good point. Yeah, it's interesting what you're saying about certain like LMs being great with say JavaScript because I know another founder, I think it might be Dominic from Mentor Cruise, was saying like because he's a Django user, sometimes
Ah.
it'll just like you know, invent like packages for Django that don't exist and just like so yeah, I think that's interesting and yeah, it's interesting that you're saying that you don't think I guess like you hear a lot of like stories about people saying it will replace engineers, etc. So
I mean, yeah, in 10 years maybe, yeah, but not next week.
yeah,
Right? So I think I think right now at least, the more specific you can be with AI, the more advantageous it is, right? Like the more specific you can give it context and say, how do I solve this one problem? I think that's what AI is fantastic at right now. Coming in and say, can you build me a project that does X, Y, and Z? It's going to be like, yeah, here's a nice little interface for you, but is it actually going to work and do all of those things? But no, I don't think it is. I don't think it's quite there yet. And like you said, will it at some point get there? Yeah, I mean, obviously, because that's progress, and we're going to have quantum computing soon, right? Like once the computers are powerful enough, can they do all of these things in a fashion and a speed that makes sense? Absolutely, but we're still a ways away from that, I think.
Yeah, fair enough. Cool. Well, thanks for chatting to me about Bluesky Directory and all your ideas on indie hacking and side projects. Yeah, do you have any links or other places that you want me to mention?
No, I mean, yeah, I'm like you said, I'm trying to be active as possible on Blue Sky. So yeah, just link to that, and then I'm gonna try and get a little bit more active on my mailing list on my newsletter as well. That's sideprojectmvp.com. And yeah, I think that yeah, just Blue Sky and Side Project MVP would be awesome.
Yeah, awesome. I'll put them in. But yeah, thanks again, and yeah, I'll speak to you on Blue Sky Skin.
Sounds good. All right.
All right. Cheers, mate. Bye.
See you. Bye bye.